Did you know that according to a recent study, over 70% of people base their self-worth on external factors like their job, income, or their physical appearance? Crazy, right? Here's the thing. Those are some of the most fragile foundations to build our self-worth on. And yet, most of us have been there. I know I have. So I got a quick question for you. How do you measure your self-worth? Is it your bank account? The car in your driveway? The six-pack abs you're trying to carve out in the gym? Or maybe it's something deeper. Welcome to today's episode, where we're diving into a journal prompt that flipped my thinking on its head. And spoiler alert, it has nothing to do with Instagram likes. But first, hi there. Welcome to the Wolverine Lifestyle Podcast, where personal growth meets deep thought and introspection. I am your host, Dylan Andres, and in this episode, we are exploring my personal journey through the journal prompt. How do you measure your self-worth? Is it based on external achievements or something within? This question struck a nerve for me because, to be honest, I'd never really thought about it before. And when I did, it completely shifted how I see myself and the world around me. Well, let's unpack this together. When I first read this journal prompt, my gut reaction was to just brush it off. Self-worth? Easy question, right? Wrong. It hit me hard because I realized I never truly sat with it before. For most of my past, my self-worth wasn't just low. It was non-existent. I based it entirely on external comparisons. You name it, I measured myself against it. My bank account, my car, the size of my house, my physical appearance, and even whether or not I had a partner at the time. It was this constant hamster wheel of more, and more. The kicker was, no matter how much I achieved, it was never enough. I'd compare myself to friends, to colleagues, to strangers, social media influencers. Their success made me feel like I was failing continually, over and over again. And when we're stuck in that cycle, we're not just chasing external validation. We are handing over the keys to our self-worth. Does that sound familiar to you? I got a question. What external achievements do you base your self-worth on? Are you constantly measuring yourself against someone else's highlight reel? I want you to take a moment and reflect on that question as we continue through the rest of this. While I spent years chasing external markers of worth, there were moments, small but profound, that gave me glimpses of what truly matters. I remember watching people I know do good things, genuinely good things, acts of kindness, moments of care, and genuine connection. I recall a specific moment when this hit home for me. A good friend of mine, longtime friend of mine, he spent an entire weekend hosting and participating in a charity hockey tournament that he set up for this young man in our community. This doesn't even mention how many hours of weeks leading up to the tournament that went into planning this thing. This young man needed help because he was working at a tire shop and there was an accident. A tire had exploded in front of him and caused him some major injuries that prevented him from working or even being able to live a normal life for quite some time. And then my friend did it all over again the next year for a woman this time who was a lifelong truck driver, and she was losing her eyesight along with her quality and way of life. This man, one of my longest friends, wasn't a well-known figure in the community. He never did these charity tournaments for recognition or reward, just simply because he could. Witnessing that selfless act moved me on levels I don't even know how to explain even to this day. It made me pause and reflect on how profoundly and meaningful those kinds of actions really are, not just for others, but for our own sense of self-worth. It reminded me that the value we hold isn't in awards or achievements. It's in how we show up for each other in those times of need. I remember talking to my friend after the first tournament. essentially trying to discover his why behind the desire to organize them. Now, of course, you have to know my friend to understand, but his picture could be beside the word sarcastic in the dictionary. So his response was simply, because I do what I want. Of course, after a few minutes of our usual back and forth banter, he finally told me this quote: "You have not lived today until you have done something for someone who can never repay you." And that's why he did them and continues to do things to this day. In those moments, I realized that our capacity to love and care for one another is what truly matters. The more I thought about it, the more I saw that when we have less capacity to love and care, it's often a reflection of how many times that we have been hurt or stung by the world, and we let that sting dictate how we show up for ourselves and others. Think about it. When we're running on empty, burnt out, and disconnected from ourselves, it's hard to show up fully. And that's when I started to understand that self-worth isn't about what we have. It's about who we are. And who we are is a very big package to gift to somebody. When was the last time your personal self-worth was reflected in how much you loved and did for someone? Did it feel different from striving to achieve something external? Over time, I started to see through the illusion of comparison. Self-worth isn't a flexible measurement. It doesn't increase or decrease based on our achievements or our failures. We're all invaluable. We are all irreplaceable. To compare ourselves to others, that's just programming from society. Social media, advertising, and even well-meaning friends can feed into this belief that we're not enough unless we measure up to some sort of external standard. But guess what? The standards keep changing. And if we let them dictate our self-worth, we will never truly feel satisfied. As of today, I know better. My self-worth isn't tied to anyone else's journey, and yours shouldn't be either. So let's talk about how we can break free from this cycle. Here's something that you can do today. Take inventory of the areas in your life where you're comparing yourself to others. Write them down. Then for each one, ask yourself, is this really where my worth lies? Like, really? Or is this just what I've been taught to believe? For instance, when I did this exercise, I realized how much of my self-worth I had tied to how I physically looked and my career achievements. Once I wrote these down, it became clear how conditional and fragile that mindset truly was. I also got a close friend of mine to do this too, and they discovered they were basing their worth entirely on how others perceived their physical appearance. Clearly, external validation for how we physically look is a deep-rooted societal programming that I truly hope we can collectively start moving away from. Now, don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with wanting to look a certain way. However, there are a lot of things wrong when we place our entire self-worth on whether or not we look like Barbie or a comic book hero. Question your beliefs, just the same as we question ours. The process of questioning these beliefs open up a new sense of freedom for the both of us. Okay. So if self-worth isn't about external achievements, what is it about? We know it's about who we are, but what does that even mean? For me, it came down to 5 key pillars. The first pillar are inner qualities, valuing kindness, empathy, integrity, and authenticity. These are the traits that truly define who we are. Number 2, growth and resilience. How we choose to respond to challenges and our willingness to learn and grow. It's not about being perfect. It is about progress. Always. The third one, alignment with our values. Living in accordance with what we believe in. When we're aligned with our values, external validation becomes completely irrelevant. The fourth one, self-acceptance. embracing both our strengths and imperfections without judgment. This one's tough, but transformative once we get the hang of it. The fifth one, capacity for love and connection. The depth of our relationships and our ability to nurture them. At the end of the day, it's the connections we make that truly matter. When I started to measure my self-worth based on these internal factors, my life changed. With these mental shifts, I was able to embrace growth over perfection, and that led to more inner peace and emotional freedom. I started noticing that the way I showed up behind closed doors became very, very similar to the person that everybody else in the world got to see. I was finally able to start showing up authentically. And honestly, I still don't know how to fully express how freeing that feeling is. To move through life without the chains of concern for what others think and feel about me is absolutely wild. Now, don't get me wrong. I still have my moments. There are times when those old thoughts will creep back in certain situations. However, it is so much more simpler for me to just drop them now. And the more I do that and bring myself to that ground zero foundation, the easier it becomes each time those old thoughts try to slip in. It does take practice and time, but it is possible. How would your life change if you measured your self-worth based on your inner qualities and values rather than external achievements? I want you to think about that. And as soon as we finish this up, I want you to grab a journal or even the notes app on your phone. Here are a few questions to further reflect on. The first one, how do you currently measure your self-worth? What internal qualities do you value most in yourself? Where do you find yourself caught up in the comparison trap? What steps can you take to shift your focus inward? Take your time with these questions, and if you're comfortable enough, share your reflections with me on any one of my social platforms, or even simply in the podcast comments. I'd love to hear what came up for you. So here's the takeaway, the big takeaway of today. Self-worth isn't something you earn or achieve. It's something you recognize and embrace. It comes from knowing who you are and valuing yourself for the unique, irreplaceable person you are. And remember, you are enough. And I repeat, you are enough, just as you are, right here, right now. As always, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Wolverine Lifestyle Podcast. If it resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need it. It's the best way to get this message out there. And if you're ready to take a step further into your own self-exploration journey, grab my free ebook, 30 Days to Know Yourself. The link will be in the show notes along with all of the rest of the links to the rest of my socials and resources. Until next time, remember, your worth was never meant to be measured by what you achieve, but by who you are at your core. Your fulfillment, true fulfillment, comes not from chasing external validation, but by aligning with your values, embracing your imperfections, and showing up authentically in every moment. Growth isn't about perfection, it's about progress. And the relationships you nurture with yourself and others will always hold more value than the accolades on your resume. So as you step back into your life, I challenge you to pause, reflect, and ask yourself, am I living in alignment with who I truly am? Because that is where the transformation begins.